the confrontation. There was something in his eyes, a calculation, a weighing of options that looked remarkably like recognition. Reed didn't even glance back. "Hey, stay out of this, old-timer. This is about respect, about protecting what's sacred." Willow's jacket sleeve had ridden up with Reed's grip, exposing her forearm. The skin there was crossed with thin white lines, scars that could have been anything, from anything meaning nothing to the untrained eye. Derek Monroe's eyes weren't untrained. They narrowed fractionally before he settled back onto his stool, took a long pull of his Coors Light, and watched. "I'm calling the MPs." Reed released her collar, pulled out his phone. "Let them deal with this stolen valor garbage. Maybe a night in lockup will teach you some respect for the uniform." The call took 30 seconds. Military police dispatch at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado was only 2 miles away. They were used to Friday night calls from Anchor Bar, usually drunk sailors needing escort. Back to base, occasionally fights that escalated beyond the civilian law's patience. But impersonating a SEAL, that got their attention. Willow remained perfectly still throughout. She didn't argue, didn't run, didn't plead. Just stood there with her hands loose at her sides, weight balanced evenly on both feet, breathing steady and controlled. The kind of calm that comes from training, or shock, or something else entirely. When Sergeant Mason Drake arrived 12 minutes later, with Corporal Amber Torres in tow, he approached the situation with the weariness of a man who'd processed too many of these complaints. 26 years old, 5 years in the MPs, Drake had developed the particular brand of cynicism that came from dealing with military wannabes, SEAL groupies, and the assorted chaos that orbited one of America's most elite special operations bases. "Another one," he muttered to Torres as they surveyed the scene. "What is it this month? 4th fake operator we've processed." Torres, younger and less jaded, studied Willow more carefully. "She doesn't look the type. They never do until they're in handcuffs crying about how it was just a misunderstanding." Drake pulled out his cuffs, approached Willow with the mechanical efficiency of routine. "Ma'am, I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." Willow complied. As Drake reached for her wrists, something happened, something small that Torres caught, but Drake missed entirely. As the cuffs touched Willow's skin, her hands automatically rotated inward and down, thumbs together. Wrists angled exactly 30 degrees from vertical. It was a position that minimized pressure points and maintained blood flow, the kind of detail taught in advanced resistance to interrogation training. Torres's eyes widened slightly. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "You have the right to remain silent," Drake intoned, ratcheting the cuffs with more force than strictly necessary. "Anything you say can and will be used against you." The walk to the MP vehicle was a parade of humiliation. 43 witnesses, 43 phone cameras, countless social media streams, broadcasting what looked like simple justice, another faker caught and dragged away. Reed followed them out, still talking voice, carrying across the parking lot. "You should see the real thing sometime, real SEALs. Maybe then you'd understand what you're pretending to be." He leaned against his truck, arms crossed, watching Drake load Willow into the back seat. "Takes Hell Week to earn that trident. 237 hours of the worst suffering the human body can endure. Hypothermia, sleep deprivation, people literally hallucinating from exhaustion. And you just bought it at what Target Willow's jaw tightened fractionally. One of Reed's teammates, Chief Petty Officer Cyrus Wallace, though his name tag was obscured, whistled low. 237 hours. He said it like someone checking an equation. That's specific. "The Hell Week's not exactly classified information," Reed shot back, but there was a pause before he said it, just a heartbeat of doubt. The MP cruiser pulled away, leaving behind a bar full of witnesses already crafting their versions of the story for maximum virality. Chloe Winters stood in the doorway, cell phone in hand, staring at the space where her quiet co-worker had been arrested. She pulled up Willow's contact. They'd exchanged numbers during the hiring process 3 months ago. But Willow Harper's social media presence was practically non-existent. One Facebook profile with no posts, a LinkedIn that listed bartender at various establishments, and absolutely nothing else, which struck Chloe as odd, but then again lots of people avoided social media. Derek Monroe was the last to leave, waiting until the crowd thinned before approaching the bar, where Naomi Sullivan, the owner, was wiping down surfaces with aggressive vigor. "That girl," he said quietly. "How long she worked here?" 3 months, best employee I've got. Always on time, never calls in, and sick doesn't complain. Naomi paused mid-wipe. You know something, Derek? Monroe studied the amber liquid in his glass, then drained it. I know that people who can stay that calm under that kind of pressure usually learned it somewhere specific. And I know that Hell Week is 232 hours, not 237. Lieutenant Reed got his own qualification timeline wrong. He set down exact payment for his tab, including the usual tip. I also know that sometimes the people who look weakest are the ones you should worry about most. Should I be worried? Not about her. Monroe pulled on his jacket a worn leather number with Marine Corps insignia barely visible on the shoulder. But those SEALs might want to start worrying. Good night, Naomi. The military police station at the main gate of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado was designed for processing, not comfort. Concrete floors, fluorescent lights that flickered every 47 seconds, metal furniture bolted to the ground, and that particular institutional smell of disinfectant failing to mask decades of sweat and fear. Drake walked Willow through processing with the cheerfulness of someone who'd found the humor in routine degradation. Empty your pockets, everything on the table, jewelry too. Willow complied. The contents were sparse, a driver's license identifying her as Willow Harper, age 31, address in San Diego's Hillcrest neighborhood. $43 in bills and change. A single key on a plain ring. A folding knife with a 3-inch blade legal, but Drake raised an eyebrow. No phone, which struck Torres as odd for someone under 35, but wasn't technically relevant. What happens next will leave you speechless. Before we continue, if you're already hooked by this shocking confrontation, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. These real-life military encounters reveal truths that are stranger than fiction. The tension is about to escalate in ways nobody in that bar could have predicted. Stay with us. You won't believe what they discover about this quiet bartender. This story gets more intense with every passing minute. Fingerprinting. Drake led her to the scanner, pressed her fingers against the glass one by one. Willow's hands were smaller than average, but the calluses were unmistakable thick pads across the palm below each finger, the kind that came from gripping weapons or climbing ropes or both. Drake noticed them, but misinterpreted. You work construction or something. Bartender, Willow said quietly. Lots of glassware. Torres, standing behind Drake, saw the calluses differently. She'd gone through basic combat training, learned to shoot, climb, rappel. Her hands had developed calluses in specific places. These weren't bartender hands. These were something else. The fingerprint scan completed. Drake frowned at the screen. Huh. No criminal record. Not even a parking ticket. Told you, Willow said. Yeah, well, tell it to the judge. Drake jerked his thumb toward the hallway. Interrogation room 2. Let's go. The walk down the corridor gave Torres a chance to observe more closely. Willow's gait was unusual, perfectly balanced each step, landing heel-toe with minimal sound weight distribution, optimized for rapid direction change. Military bearing, but not parade ground precision. Something more tactical. Interrogation room 2 was 8 feet by 10 feet, 1 metal table, 3 chairs, a two-way mirror that everyone pretended wasn't a two-way mirror. Drake pointed to the chair facing the mirror. Sit. Willow sat. Her posture was perfect, back straight, feet flat on the floor, hands resting on the table. But she scanned the room with a thoroughness that suggested automatic threat assessment. 2 seconds to catalog exits, 1 second to note the camera position, a half second to calculate the most vulnerable structural point in the drywall to the left of the door. Torres caught all of it. The more she watched, the more convinced she became that something was very wrong with this arrest. Reed arrived 20 minutes later with his SEAL team in tow, their presence transforming the station into something between a fraternity house and a courthouse. Chief Petty Officer Cyrus Wallace, 38 years old, 2 deployment stars on his warfare, pinned the kind of reputation that made junior officers nervous, walked point. He'd served in places that didn't appear on maps, with people whose names were redacted from official reports. This her, Wallace studied Willow through the two-way mirror. Drake had left her alone for the past 15 minutes. Standard protocol let them stew, and Willow hadn't moved except to breathe. No fidgeting, no nervous energy, No signs of stress despite being in handcuffs in an interrogation room. "That's her," Reed confirmed. "Caught her red-handed wearing SEAL insignia at Anchor Bar. Where'd she get the shirt? Claims she bought it somewhere. I didn't let her finish the lie." Wallace grunted, still watching. Willow's eyes had found the camera in the upper right corner of the room. She looked directly at it for exactly 3 seconds, expression neutral, then returned her gaze to the table. It wasn't the behavior of someone caught in a crime. It was the behavior of someone documenting the situation. "She doesn't act guilty," Wallace observed. "They never think they are," Reed replied. "That's the problem. They see it as cosplay, not disrespect." The door to the observation room opened. Lieutenant Fiona Blackwood entered with the kind of authority that came from both rank and righteousness. 33 years old JAG officer specialist in military justice and someone who'd spent her entire career fighting to be taken seriously in a male-dominated institution. She had exactly zero patience for women who, in her view, disrespected that fight by faking credentials. "Gentlemen," she nodded to the assembled SEALs, pointedly ignored Drake. "I'm here to observe the interview. This falls under military jurisdiction given the location and the nature of the alleged offense." "We haven't charged her yet," Drake protested weakly. "Then let's remedy that." Blackwood moved to the mirror, studied Willow with open disdain. "She certainly doesn't look like SEAL material." "That's the point," Reed said. "She's trying to claim something she didn't earn." "Then let's confirm it. Run her name through the SEAL database." Drake returned to his desk, logged into the Naval Special Warfare Command database, typed in Willow Harper. The search took 42 seconds. The result was unequivocal, no match found. "There it is." Reed's voice carried triumph and vindication in equal measure. "Proof positive. She's a fake." In the interrogation room, Willow remained motionless. If she knew her name was being run through databases, if she knew her fate was being decided by people who'd already made up their minds, she gave no sign. Just sat there with the patience of someone who'd learned to wait, who'd trained for situations exactly like this, who knew that time was a weapon if you knew how to use it. Torres entered the observation room, addressed Wallace directly. "Sir, permission to speak." "Granted." "Something's not right about this. Her hands, she has the wrong calluses for a bartender. And the way she moved when Sergeant Drake cuffed her, she automatically assumed an interrogation-resistant position. That's advanced training. Or she watches too many YouTube videos." Reed dismissed. "You can learn anything online." "Can you learn muscle memory online?" Torres pressed. Because that was pure reflex. She didn't think about it. Wallace studied the young corporal with new interest. "What else did you notice?" "Her breathing. Standard box pattern, 4 seconds and 4 seconds. Hold 4 seconds out. 4 seconds, hold. That's tactical breathing for stress management. And she hasn't looked at the door once. Most suspects in interrogation fixate on exits. She's focused on the camera and the structural integrity of the room itself." "Maybe she's just weird," Reed insisted, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. Blackwood cut through the debate with prosecutorial efficiency. "Speculation is irrelevant. The facts are simple. She's wearing SEAL insignia, she's not in the database, therefore she's impersonating. Let's proceed with the interview and formal charges." En depot. Down. While Willow Harper sat in interrogation room 2, and while the debate continued in the observation room, and while phones across San Diego shared videos of her arrest with increasingly sensational captions, 3 people were having very different reactions to the evening's events. At his home in La Jolla, Derek Monroe sat at a desk that hadn't seen use in months and pulled out a lockbox from the bottom drawer. Inside were items from a previous life dog tags unit, patches of faded photograph of 12 men in desert camouflage standing in front of a compound that didn't exist anymore. He found what he was looking for, a phone number written on the back of a business card, 15 years old, but still valid because certain numbers never changed. He dialed. It rang 6 times before someone picked up. "This is a secure line," a woman's voice said. "Identify yourself." "Derek Monroe, 1st Marine Division, retired 2009. Authorization code, Tango Oscar November 37. A pause. Keyboard clicking. "Authorization confirmed. State your business." "I need to report a potential security breach. There's a woman who just got arrested for impersonating a SEAL at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. But I think she might be one of yours." Another pause, longer this time. Describe her. Monroe did, including details about her composure, her automatic responses, her apparent training. When he finished, the woman on the other end of the line said nothing for 23 seconds. "We'll look into it," she finally said. "Do not interfere further. Do not discuss this call with anyone. Clear. Crystal." The line went dead. Back at Anchor, Bar Chloe Winters was closing up when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her. "Is this Chloe?" A man's voice, older, calm. "Who's asking?" "A friend of Willow's. I need to know, in the 3 months she's worked there, did she ever talk about her past? Where she's from? What she did before bartending?" Chloe's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" "Someone trying to help her. Please. It's important." Chloe thought back through dozens of shifts. Willow had been the perfect coworker, reliable, competent, friendly enough, but never oversharing. They'd talked about surface things, weather, customers, sports. But personal history. She never talked about herself, like ever. I figured she was just private. "Did anyone unusual ever come into the bar asking for her specifically?" "No, she kept to herself. Regulars liked her because she remembered orders and didn't make small talk. If anyone asked, police, military, anyone, you don't know anything. Understood? But I don't know anything." "Good, keep it that way." The call ended. Chloe stood in the empty bar phone, still pressed to her ear, wondering what exactly she'd gotten caught in the middle of. In the observation room at the MP station, the debate had evolved into a plan. Wallace, despite his initial skepticism, had been persuaded by Blackwood's prosecutorial certainty. But he added his own twist. "Before we formally charge her, I want to test her. If she's going to claim knowledge of SEAL operations, let's see if she actually knows anything." "How?" Drake asked. "Weapons test, standard field strip and reassembly. Every SEAL can do it blindfolded. If she's never been through training, she'll fail immediately." Reed grinned. "I like it. Public humiliation before criminal charges. Poetic." Torres felt her stomach tighten, but said nothing. She was too junior to argue with officers, especially SEALs with combat deployments. But she made a mental note to document everything, just in case this turned into something other than what it appeared to be. They entered the interrogation room together, Wallace, Reed, Drake, and Blackwood. Willow looked up as they filed, and her expression unchanged. If she was intimidated by 4 people surrounding her in a locked room, she didn't show it. Wallace set a disassembled M4 carbine on the table in front of her. Upper receiver, lower receiver, bolt, carrier group, charging handle, and various springs and pins all laid out in deliberate chaos. Standard issue, nothing special, but also nothing a civilian would normally have access to. "You want to wear the trident?" Wallace's voice was measured, almost gentle. It was somehow more threatening than Reed's aggression. "Then prove you understand what it represents. Field strip this weapon, then reassemble it. Every SEAL learns this in Bud S. If you've actually earned the right to wear that shirt, this should be easy." Willow looked at the weapon components. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, calculation, or maybe just resignation. Her hands were still cuffed. "You'll need to take these off," she said quietly. Her first words in nearly an hour. Drake unlocked the handcuffs. Willow rotated her wrists, slowly returning circulation, the movement economical and practiced. She flexed her fingers once, then reached for the weapon parts. What happened next took exactly 47 seconds. Her hands moved with the kind of fluidity that comes from repetition measured in thousands of hours. Upper receiver, first checking the chamber, with a glance that suggested the habit was burned into neural pathways. Lower receiver, next testing the trigger mechanism with 2 fingers, while her other hand aligned the buffer spring. Bolt carrier group slid home, with a precision that suggested she could feel the tolerances. She wasn't fast in the way that suggests rushing. She was fast in the way that suggests the distinction between thinking and doing had dissolved through training. Each movement flowed into the next, without pause, without hesitation, without conscious thought. When the weapon was reassembled, she performed a function check, charging handle, trigger press, safety selector, with the automatic thoroughness of someone who'd been taught that incomplete checks killed people. Then she set it down on the table, perfectly aligned with the edge, and folded her hands in her lap. The room was silent. Wallace picked up the M4, checked it himself. 47 seconds. That's competitive. "Lucky guess," Reed said, but his voice had lost its confidence. YouTube tutorials. Nobody could, Wallace cut him off. That wasn't memorization, that was muscle memory. You can't fake that. Blackwood frowned. So, she's had weapons training. Doesn't mean she's a SEAL. Plenty of military branches teach weapons maintenance. Army, Marines, even Air Force security forces. Check those databases, Wallace ordered Drake. Drake returned to his computer, expanded his search. Army Personnel Database, Marine Corps records, Air Force, Coast Guard. Even CIA and FBI databases that MPs technically had read-only access to for identification purposes. Every search came back the same, no match found. She doesn't exist, Drake said slowly. I mean, she has a driver's license and a social security number, but there's no military record anywhere in the system. In the interrogation room, Willow sat quietly, hands folded, face neutral. But Torres, still watching from the doorway, caught something in her eyes. Not fear, not panic, something closer to patience. The look of someone waiting for a process to complete, for wheels to turn, for the inevitable to arrive. Maybe she's Foreign Legion, Reed suggested, grasping. French Foreign Legion takes anyone, doesn't keep records the same way. For someone who supposedly earned a trident through French Foreign Legion training, she sure looks American, Wallace observed dryly. And the FFI doesn't train SEALs. Try again. Blackwood pulled out her phone, typed rapidly. I'm calling in a favor. JAG has access to higher-level databases for classified personnel. If she's in the system anywhere, we'll find her. While they waited for Blackwood's contact to respond, Wallace decided to push further. He sat down across from Willow, studied her with the intensity of someone trained to read people in life-or-death situations. Where'd you serve? He asked conversationally. I didn't. Don't lie to me. That weapons drill, you've done it 10,000 times minimum. That kind of skill doesn't come from YouTube videos and a weekend at a firing range. Willow met his eyes. My brother was a Marine. He taught me. What was his name? Michael Harper. He died in Fallujah 2007. Drake immediately searched the Marine Corps casualty database. 3 minutes later, KIA confirmed. Lance Corporal Michael Harper, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, died August 12, 2007, Fallujah, Iraq. The room exhaled. A dead brother explained everything. The shirt, the training, the familiarity with weapons. She wasn't impersonating. She was memorializing. Blackwood's expression softened fractionally. I'm sorry for your loss. It was a long time ago, Willow said, still quiet, still composed. She had told a story that was true in most of its details. Michael Harper had existed. He had died in Fallujah. The connection between them was the only fabrication, a thread so simple and plausible that it dissolved suspicion like salt in water. Reed deflated visibly. So she's just wearing her dead brother's shirt. Looks that way, Wallace agreed. He stood, moved toward the door. Sergeant Drake processed her release. This was a misunderstanding. Wait. The voice came from the observation room. Master Chief Anderson Burke had been watching the entire interrogation in silence. Now he stepped into the room, his presence commanding immediate attention. 50 years old, 32 years in the Navy, a chest full of medals that included 2 bronze stars and a silver star. Burke had seen things that made grown men wake up screaming decades later. There's still something wrong here, Burke said. That story about the brother, it's convenient. Too convenient. You calling her a liar? Reed bristled. We verified the brother died. I'm saying that a woman who can field strip an M4 in 47 seconds, who maintains tactical breathing under interrogation, who automatically assumes resistance positions when being cuffed, and who's somehow been flying completely under the radar for 31 years, that woman deserves more scrutiny than a 5-minute database search. Wallace frowned. What are you suggesting, Master Chief? I'm suggesting we call Commander Hartwell, right now, before we release her. Because if there's any chance this is something other than what it appears to be, we need someone with the authority to access deeper systems. 1. District Spirits. While Willow Harper sat in Interrogation Room 2, while the MPs and SEALs debated her fate, and while phone calls were being made to increasingly senior personnel, the story was spreading across social media with the viral velocity that defines modern scandal. The video from Anchor Bar had been shared 17,000 times. Comments ranged from righteous support for the SEALs to concerns about excessive force to jokes about Karen tries to be a Navy SEAL. Local news had picked it up. A reporter was already outside the MP station camera crew in tow, waiting for a statement. But in certain circles that existed in the shadows of official structures that communicated through encrypted channels and off-the-books meetings, the video triggered different reactions. At CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, a night shift analyst in the Special Activities Division flagged something in the facial recognition sweep of social media. The system had pinged on a face in the background of the anchor bar video. Cross-reference with classified databases returned a match. The analyst's blood pressure spiked as she read the file. She picked up a secure phone, dialed an extension that wasn't listed in any directory. "We have a problem," she said when it was answered. "Go 7 has been compromised." Ords. Commander Solomon Hartwell arrived at the MP station at 9:47 p.m., summoned from a dinner party, where he'd been explaining to a rear admiral why his base had the lowest incident rate in the Pacific Fleet. He was not happy about the interruption, and his expression communicated this with the clarity of a klaxon. 45 years old, 24 years in the Navy, Hartwell had commanded everything from a destroyer to a carrier air wing. He'd been in this position base commander at Coronado for 18 months and had cultivated a reputation for being simultaneously fair and absolutely intolerant of nonsense. "This better be good," he said as he entered the station. Wallace Burke, Reed Blackwood, and Drake stood in the observation room, watching Willow through the two-way mirror. Torres hovered near the door, technically off duty, but unwilling to leave. Burke briefed him in 90 seconds, covering everything from the initial arrest to the weapons test to the convenient dead brother story. Hartwell studied Willow through the glass. "She doesn't look like a threat." "That's what concerns me, sir," Burke replied. "She doesn't look like anything, which is either the truth she's nobody, or it's the best cover I've ever seen." "You're suggesting she's undercover, here on my base." "I'm suggesting we eliminate that possibility before releasing her. Because if she is something other than a bartender with a dead brother, and we let her walk and something happens, that's on us." Hartwell considered this. He was a careful man, methodical, the kind of officer who'd risen through ranks by making few mistakes and learning from all of them. What databases have been checked? All standard military personnel systems, criminal records, known associates, social media. Everything came back either clean or non-existent. What about higher classifications? "That's why we called you, sir. JAG has access to some restricted systems, but TS-SCI and above requires flag officer authorization." Hartwell turned to Lieutenant Commander Iris Palmer, the base intelligence officer who'd arrived with him. "Can you access JWICS? The Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communication System, the network where classified information lived?" "Yes, sir. But if she's in that system, it means she's either done something very bad or something very classified. And if it's the latter, we're about to step in something we really shouldn't. Better to step in it now than trip over it later." Hartwell made the decision with the confidence of someone whose instincts had been proven right more often than not. "Run her through every system you have access to. TS, SCI, SAP, even SCI. If there's anything we need to know." Palmer pulled out a secure tablet logged into systems that existed several levels above standard classification. Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, inputting queries, waiting for responses, refining searches. The first 3 searches returned nothing. Standard classified databases showed no record of Willow Harper. The 4th search, SAP Special Access Programs, took longer. When the result appeared on screen, Palmer's face went white. "Sir," she said quietly, "you need to see this." While Willow Harper sat in that interrogation room, her encrypted communication device remained hidden, the kind of advanced technology that intelligence operatives rely on for secure contact with handlers. These military-grade encrypted phones use satellite connectivity and quantum encryption to ensure communications cannot be intercepted. They're designed for personnel operating in high-risk environments where standard devices would compromise mission security. The technology includes biometric authentication, remote wipe capabilities, and GPS tracking that can be disabled for covert operations. Hartwell looked at the screen. His jaw tightened. His hand holding the tablet began to tremble slightly. Not fear, but the physical manifestation of rapidly recalculating everything he thought he understood about this situation. The file on the screen was sparse as such files always were. Most of it was redacted, but what was visible was enough. Subject, redacted, codename. Ghost 7, clearance TS SCI, plus SAP access, status knock, non-official. Cover, active agency, classified operations. 12 classified missions, 2018-2023, current assignment, redacted. And at the bottom, a photograph. Slightly grainy, clearly surveillance footage, but unmistakable. Willow Harper wearing tactical gear, standing in what looks like a compound somewhere in Central Asia, surrounded by people whose faces were blurred out. "Holy cow," Reed whispered, looking over Hartwell's shoulder. "Everyone out," Hartwell said, his voice deadly calm. "Everyone except Master Chief Burke and Lieutenant Commander Palmer. Now." They hesitated. That was not a suggestion. Reed, Drake, Blackwood, and Wallace filed out. Torres followed, casting one last look at Willow through the mirror. The woman sat exactly as she had for the past 2 hours, patient and still, as if she'd known all along how this would end. When the room had cleared, Hartwell set down the tablet and rubbed his face with both hands. "Tell me I'm reading this wrong." "You're not, sir," Palmer said. "She's CIA Special Activities Division, deep cover operative. And we just arrested her on camera in front of 40 witnesses who've now posted it all over social media." Burke let out a long breath. "This is bad. This is catastrophic," Hartwell corrected. "Her NOC is burned, her cover's destroyed. Whatever operation she was running is compromised. And it's our fault." "What do we do?" Hartwell picked up the tablet, again scrolled through what little information the file provided. "It says to contact this number in case of emergency." He pointed to a phone number at the bottom of the screen. "That's going to be her handler, who is about to have a very bad evening." He made the call. It was answered on the second ring by a woman whose voice conveyed the emotional warmth of a glacier. "This is Commander Solomon Hartwell, Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. I'm calling about an individual currently in my custody. I believe she may be one of yours." A pause. "Describe her." Hartwell did, including the codename from the file. Another pause longer, keyboard clicking in the background. "Stand by." The hold lasted 4 minutes. When the woman returned, her voice had shifted from cold to Arctic. "I'm Special Agent Heather Vaughn, CIA Special Activities Division. You have Ghost 7 in custody. If that's who Willow Harper actually is, then yes. On what charges?" "Impersonating a Navy SEAL." Silence. "Then, you arrested an active CIA operative for impersonating a Navy SEAL while she was maintaining cover for a classified operation. We didn't know." "Of course you didn't know. That's the entire point of deep cover. But now you do know, which means roughly 43 civilians also know, which means her cover is comprehensively blown, which means 6 months of operational development just went up in smoke." Hartwell felt his career prospects dimming in real time. "What do you need me to do?" "First, get her out of custody immediately. Second, confiscate every phone and camera in that building. Third, get everyone who saw that file to sign NDAs with teeth. Fourth, prepare for a cleanup team to arrive within the hour. And fifth, keep her there until I arrive. Do not let her leave the building. Clear." "Crystal." "Good. And Commander, this conversation never happened. The file you accessed doesn't exist. Ghost 7 was never in your custody. The story is that this was all a misunderstanding about a dead brother's shirt. You apologize she went home. Any deviation from that narrative will be considered a national security breach. Are we clear?" "Yes, ma'am." The line went dead. Hartwell set down his phone and looked at Burke and Palmer. "Well, this is the part of command they don't teach you at the War College." Palmer was already typing. "Sir, there's more in the file. If I expand the search parameters, don't..." Hartwell cut her off. "We already know more than we should. The less detail we have, the better position we're in when people start asking uncomfortable questions. But sir, if she was running an operation here, shouldn't we know what it was? For security purposes? If CIA wanted us to know, they would have told us. The fact that they didn't means it's none of our business. And now that we've accidentally made it our business, the best thing we can do is back away slowly and let them handle it." Burke moved to the observation room window, looked at Willow. "Should we tell her we know?" "She already knows we know. Look at her." They looked. Willow's posture had changed subtly. She was still sitting quietly, still appeared calm, but there was something different in the way she held herself. The mask of civilian vulnerability had slipped revealing something harder underneath. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was calculating. "She's probably running through contingencies right now," Palmer observed, "figuring out how much we've compromised, what assets are exposed, how to salvage the operation." "There's no salvaging it," Hartwell said. "It's over. We saw to that." He moved toward the door. "Come on, time to go apologize to someone who probably wants to shoot all of us." If were it stand. They entered the interrogation room together, Hartwell, Burke, and Palmer. Willow looked up as they entered, and something in her eyes confirmed every suspicion. This wasn't a scared bartender. This was a professional assessing a tactical situation. Hartwell sat down across from her. "Ms. Harper, or should I use a different name?" "Harper's fine. I'm Commander Solomon Hartwell. I run this base, and I owe you an apology." Willow's expression didn't change. For compromising an active operation, for burning your cover, for putting you at risk, take your pick. A slight smile touched her lips. "You accessed the file." "I did, and I immediately regretted it." "You shouldn't. You did your job. Your Master Chief had good instincts." She glanced at Burke. "You saw through the brother story." "It was a good story," Burke admitted. "But you were too calm, too controlled. Nobody's that together after 2 hours of interrogation, unless they've been trained to be." "So what happens now?" Willow asked. "Now we wait for your handler to arrive. We sign paperwork pretending this never happened, and we all go home and try to forget we ever met each other. And Lieutenant Reed," Hartwell's jaw tightened. "Lieutenant Reed is about to have a very educational conversation about operational security and the importance of not making assumptions. He'll be lucky if his career survives the next 72 hours. "He was protecting what he thought was his team's honor," Willow said. "It was stupid, but I understand the impulse." "That's generous. I've worked with SEALs before. They're protective of the trident. It's not entirely unreasonable to get angry at someone you think is stealing it." Palmer leaned forward. "Can I ask, what were you doing here? What was the operation?" Willow shook her head. "Even if I could tell you, I wouldn't. It's compartmentalized for a reason. But I can tell you this. What I was doing was important, and now it's gone. So, whoever you were trying to protect by arresting me, you just made them more vulnerable, not less." The words landed like a physical blow. Hartwell had spent his entire career trying to keep people safe. The possibility that his actions had done the opposite was almost worse than the career implications. "I'm sorry," he said again, and meant it. "Apologies don't change the outcome, but I appreciate the intent." Willow stood stretched slightly. 2 hours of sitting had taken a physical toll, even on someone trained for it. "How long until the cleanup team arrives?" "They said within the hour. That was 10 minutes ago." "Then we have about 50 minutes of awkward silence ahead of us. Unless you want to uncuff me and let me use the bathroom like a normal person." Drake, standing in the doorway, moved forward with the cuff key. As he unlocked them, Willow rubbed her wrists and said quietly, "You're good at your job, Sergeant. You ran every reasonable database. You followed protocol. This wasn't your failure." Drake looked like he wanted to believe that, but wasn't sure he could. The cleanup team arrived at 10:38 p.m. in 3 black SUVs that parked in the secure loading area behind the MP station. 6 people emerged, 4 men, 2 women, all wearing civilian clothes that somehow screamed federal agent. They moved with the coordinated efficiency of people who'd done this before, carrying equipment cases and mobile communication gear. Special Agent Heather Vaughn led them. 40 years old, 15 years with CIA, the last 8 in Special Activities Division, running operations that would never appear in history books. She had the kind of face that people forgot 5 minutes after meeting her, not unattractive, not memorable, the perfect equipment for someone in her line of work. She found Hartwell in his office. "Commander, we need to talk." They talked for 17 minutes. Hartwell laid out exactly what had happened from the initial arrest to the database searches to the moment they had accessed the classified file. Vaughn listened without interrupting her expression, never changing. When he finished, she said, "You understand that Ghost 7's operation was tracking a weapons trafficking network that's been moving advanced explosives into the United States through Mexico, and that the people running that network have killed 47 people in the last 3 years, including 2 federal agents." Hartwell's stomach dropped. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't. But now 43 civilians have video of her being arrested. Social media has her face and name. Every person in that trafficking network with half a brain is going to run her picture through facial recognition software, see the videos, and realize she was working against them. Which means everyone she's been in contact with for the last 3 months is now at risk. What can I do? You've done enough. Just sign the paperwork and force the NDAs, and pray nobody dies because of this. The words were delivered without particular venom, but they struck with the force of a physical assault. Hartwell had commanded thousands of sailors, had been responsible for billions of dollars of equipment, had made decisions in combat that determined who lived and died. But this accidentally sabotaging a CIA operation and potentially getting people killed was a new category of failure. Vaughn softened slightly, recognizing the impact. Look, you didn't know, Reed didn't know, your people did what they thought was right, but right doesn't always mean consequence-free. Now, help me contain this. The next hour was a masterclass in bureaucratic damage control. Every person who'd been in the MP station signed an NDA with criminal penalties for disclosure. Every phone was confiscated, checked for copies of sensitive material, scrubbed if necessary. The video from the interrogation room cameras was pulled and erased. Official reports were written, read revised and written again, until they told a story that was technically true, but completely misleading. Willow Harper had been arrested for wearing military insignia. Investigation revealed the shirt belonged to her dead brother. Apologies were issued. She was released. End of story. Reed and his SEAL team were brought in separately, briefed on what they could and couldn't say, and sent home with the understanding that their careers hung by threads that could be cut with a single word. Reed looked like he'd aged 10 years in 5 hours. Torres was the only person who seemed genuinely relieved. I knew something was off, she told Vaughn. The way she moved, the way she stayed calm, I knew she wasn't just a bartender. You have good instincts, Vaughn replied. But good instincts don't matter if you don't have the clearance to act on them. Remember that. At 11:52 p.m., Willow Harper walked out of the military police station, a free woman. Vaughn walked beside her, keeping a hand on her elbow that looked friendly, but functioned as a guide toward the waiting SUV. How bad is it? Willow asked quietly. 6 months of work down the drain. 3 assets potentially exposed. 1 trafficking route we'll have to let go cold because we can't risk the investigation being connected back to you. I can salvage it. No, you can't. Your face is on social media being arrested for impersonating a SEAL. The second you show up anywhere near this operation, people will notice. You're burned Ghost 7. Accept it. Willow stopped walking. There's another way. There's always another way, but it usually ends with more people dead. Get in the car. They drove in silence for 20 minutes, heading toward a safe house in Point Loma, where Willow would spend the night before being extracted back to Virginia for debriefing. The San Diego skyline glittered to their right, beautiful and oblivious to the small tragedy that had unfolded in its shadow. For what it's worth, Vaughn said, you played it perfectly in there. The dead brother story was good. Would have worked if they hadn't called in the commander. Burke saw through it. Master Chiefs always do. They've seen too much to be fooled easily. What will you do now? Willow looked out the window at the passing city. Whatever you tell me to do, that's how this works. Fair enough. But between you and me, off the record, are you okay? It was a surprisingly personal question from someone like Vaughn. Willow considered it carefully. I've been undercover for 6 months. I've built relationships, established patterns, become someone other than myself. And in 2 hours, all of that was stripped away by people who thought they were doing the right thing. So, no, I'm not okay, but I will be. That's the job. That's the job, Willow agreed. The SUV turned onto a quiet residential street, pulled into a driveway that led to a house that looked like every other house on the block. Anonymous, forgettable, perfect. One night here, Vaughn said. Transport leaves at 0600. Pack light, everything from your cover identity gets left behind. Even the shirt, Vaughn almost smiled. Especially the shirt. That thing's caused enough trouble. Willow got out of the car. Stretch took a deep breath of the cool night air. She'd been Willow Harper bartender for 6 months. Tomorrow she'd be someone else. Or maybe she'd go back to being whoever she actually was under all the layers of cover identities and operational personas. She honestly wasn't sure anymore. Ghost 7. Vaughn called from the car window. One more thing, the Commander Hartwell, he felt terrible about this. Said to tell you he was sorry. He already told me. He meant it. I know. Willow turned toward the house. They all meant it. That's what makes it worse. If they'd been malicious, I could hate them. But they weren't. They were just doing their jobs. And sometimes good people doing good jobs still manage to destroy things. She walked into the safe house without looking back. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like an ending. At 6:15 a.m., Willow Harper, or the person who'd been playing her, boarded a military transport plane at North Island Naval Air Station. The loadmaster didn't ask questions. The pilot had been briefed to forget the passenger existed the moment they landed at Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington. As the plane climbed over the Pacific Ocean, Willow pulled out a phone, not the one taken by the MPs, but a backup kept for emergencies, and checked the news feeds one last time. The story of her arrest had mostly disappeared, buried under the weight of more interesting scandals. A few local news sites still had pieces about stolen valor, incident resolved. But they were already sliding down the front pages. In 48 hours, nobody would remember it happened. Except Willow would remember, and Commander Hartwell would remember, and Master Chief Burke, and Corporal Torres, and Special Agent Vaughn, and everyone else whose lives had intersected with this small disaster. And somewhere in Mexico, in a warehouse or a safe house or a trafficking route that Willow had spent 6 months mapping, someone would eventually put the pieces together and realize that the bartender from San Diego had been something more, would realize they'd been watched, documented, compromised. And when that happened, people would die. Maybe not immediately, maybe not directly, but cause and effect were long chains in this business, and every link was forged in blood. Willow closed her eyes and tried to sleep. It didn't come easily. Or, are you still watching good? Because the mystery is about to deepen in ways that will make your jaw drop. If you're enjoying this investigation into Willow's true identity, show your support by liking this video. Share it with anyone who loves military stories with unexpected twists. The biggest reveal is still ahead. Trust me, you need to see this. 3 days later, at CIA headquarters in Langley, Willow sat across a desk from a man whose name she'd never learned in 8 years of working for him. He was senior enough that his office had windows rare in this building, and his walls displayed photographs with presidents and senators and foreign leaders. But his face remained carefully anonymous in public databases, his actual role hidden behind titles like Deputy Director for Analysis, that meant everything and nothing. Ghost 7. He said it without looking up from the file he was reading. Or should I call you Willow? Or perhaps we should use your real name for once. Any of those work, sir. He closed the file, looked at her with eyes that had seen too many operations go sideways to be surprised by one more. 6 months of work, gone. 378 hours of surveillance data that we can't use because it's connected to a burned identity. 2 informants who might be compromised. 1 trafficking network that's now alert to federal interest. I'm aware, sir. Are you also aware that Lieutenant Jasper Reed has been temporarily relieved of duty pending a security review, that Commander Hartwell is facing questions about his judgment from people several pay grades above him, that a 25-year-old MP corporal named Amber Torres had a nervous breakdown because she realized how close she came to destroying a major investigation? I didn't know about Corporal Torres, sir. Well, now you do. He opened another file, this one thinner. Here's what happens next. You take 2 weeks of mandatory leave, see the psychologist, process the operational loss. Then we reassign you. To what? He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Something worse than the last assignment. We have a situation developing in Central Asia, Afghanistan specifically. There's someone there we need to identify. Someone who's been making a lot of noise in places that should be quiet. He slid a photograph across the desk. Surveillance image, grainy, taken from distance. 2 people in a rocky valley that could have been anywhere from Pakistan to Tajikistan. One of them was clearly Willow, wearing tactical gear and a shemagh that covered most of her face. The other was a man whose face was partially obscured, but whose body language suggested authority, confidence, danger. 6 months ago, you were in Afghanistan on another operation. This man made contact with you. Brief conversation, less than 5 minutes, then he disappeared. We don't know who he is. We don't know what he wanted. But 3 weeks later, An entire village 200 kilometers from where this photo was taken was massacred. 47 people dead. Women, children, everyone. The Taliban blamed us. We didn't do it. So, who did Willow study the photograph trying to remember? 6 months ago seemed like a lifetime. She'd been running a different cover, tracking a different target, living a different life. The conversation with this man had seemed like nothing, just another local trying to sell information that might or might not be valuable. But 47 people were dead, and someone thought this man was connected. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "Find him, figure out what he wanted from you, figure out who he works for, and figure out if he's someone we need to stop before more people die." That's a significant upgrade from tracking weapons smugglers in San Diego. Yes, it is. Which is why you're going back Ghost 7, because you're one of the few people who might be able to identify him, and because you need to prove that the disaster in Coronado was an unfortunate accident, not a sign that you're losing your edge. Willow looked at the photograph again. The man's face was maybe 30% visible enough to recognize if she saw him again, not enough to run through facial recognition with any confidence. His posture suggested military training, but that could mean anything from special forces to private military contractor to terrorist with good fundamentals. "When do I leave?" 72 hours. You'll fly commercial to Dubai, then military transport to Boardroom. From there, you're on your own. We'll provide support where we can, but this is deep cover again. No backup, no official presence, no safety net. So, basically another Tuesday. He almost smiled. "Basically, any questions?" "Just one. The man in the photo, what makes you think he wanted me dead? You said that earlier." The deputy director leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers. "Because 2 weeks after that village massacre, someone put a price on your head. $500,000 to anyone who could confirm Ghost 7's real identity and location. It was pulled down after 24 hours, but the fact that it existed at all suggests someone knows who you are and wants you gone. We don't know if it's connected to this man, but the timing is suspicious." Willow felt something cold settle in her chest. $500,000 was serious money, the kind of money that attracted serious attention, the kind of money that suggested she'd stumbled into something much larger than a simple weapons trafficking investigation. "I'll find him," she said. "Good. Because if you don't, the next photograph might be of your funeral." Wotsas. Intelligence operatives and military contractors working in classified operations require specialized insurance coverage that standard policies don't provide. These comprehensive plans cover international incidents, classified medical treatments, legal defense for security clearance issues, and emergency extraction services. The policies include disability coverage for injuries sustained during covert operations, and life insurance that pays out even when cause of death cannot be publicly disclosed. Financial protection designed specifically for those serving in America's most sensitive national security roles. In San Diego, 3 weeks after the arrest, that wasn't really an arrest, Commander Hartwell sat in his office reading reports that should have been routine, but felt like landmines. The incident with Ghost 7 had officially been classified as resolved without incident, but the unofficial consequences were still rippling outward. Lieutenant Reed had been reassigned to a training command in Mississippi, technically not a punishment. Officially, a career development opportunity, practically a form of exile that everyone understood but nobody acknowledged. His SEAL career wasn't over, but it would never be what it could have been. Chief Petty Officer Wallace had retired 6 months earlier than planned, citing family reasons that were technically true, but incomplete. He'd seen too much, knew too much, and wanted to be far away from the questions that might eventually come, asking what exactly he'd learned that night. Corporal Torres had requested and received a transfer to Okinawa. She was a good MP with a promising career, but the knowledge that she'd been right, that something was wrong, that Willow Harper was more than she appeared, and that nobody had listened to her until it was too late, had soured her on the command structure. She needed distance and a fresh start. Master Chief Burke had taken exactly the opposite approach. He'd requested additional clearances, asked for assignment to Naval Intelligence, and was currently learning everything he could about how to recognize undercover operatives before accidentally destroying their missions. His reasoning was simple. If it happened once, it could happen again, and next time he wanted to be the person who prevented the disaster rather than caused it. Hartwell himself had received a private conversation with a two-star admiral who'd explained in terms that were friendly but absolutely clear that his career trajectory had been permanently altered. He'd never see 3 stars. He'd probably never see 2. He'd retire as a commander, maybe captain, if he was lucky, and the reason would never be stated officially, but everyone would know. He'd compromised a CIA operation. He'd burned an active Enoch. He'd made decisions that were reasonable and justified and completely correct according to every regulation and policy, and they'd still cause significant damage to national security. That was how it worked sometimes. Good people making good decisions still managed to break things. The universe didn't care about intentions. Hartwell looked at the framed photograph on his wall, his commissioning day 24 years ago, young and confident and certain that the world made sense. He'd learned a lot since then. Learned that certainty was a luxury, that good intentions weren't enough, that sometimes doing everything right still meant losing. He wondered where Ghost 7 was now, what new identity she'd assumed, what new operation she was running, whether she thought about that night in the MP station, or whether it was just one more blur in a career full of covers and compromises. He'd probably never know. That was the nature of her work, anonymous secret, forgotten as quickly as possible. The only people who remembered were the ones who'd stumbled into her shadow and realized too late what they'd found. Hartwell picked up a pen, signed another routine form, and tried to forget. But forgetting wasn't as easy as it should have been. In Coronado, at Anchor Bar, Chloe Winters served drinks to a Friday night crowd that looked almost identical to the one from 3 weeks ago. Same regulars, same orders, same conversations about sports and deployments and the latest base gossip. Nobody talked about Willow Harper anymore. The arrest had been news for maybe 3 days before being forgotten. Just another stolen valor incident that turned out to be nothing. The internet had moved on to newer outrages, but Chloe remembered. She remembered the phone call from the stranger who'd asked questions. She remembered watching her coworker, her friend, being led away in handcuffs. She remembered the 3 months of working together when Willow had been perfectly pleasant, perfectly professional, and perfectly opaque. She'd learned exactly nothing about who Willow Harper actually was, and now she never would. Naomi Sullivan, the bar owner, had hired a replacement within a week. Nice girl, competent, showed up on time. But she wasn't Willow. She talked too much, shared too freely, existed in ways that normal people did. Willow had been a ghost even before she left. Chloe just hadn't realized it. At closing time, as Chloe wiped down the bar and counted tips, she noticed Derek Monroe still sitting on his usual stool. He'd been quieter than usual lately, drinking a little more, staying a little longer. "You knew?" Chloe said, not a question. Monroe looked up from his glass. "Knew what? About Willow. You knew she wasn't just a bartender." He studied her for a long moment, calculating how much truth to share. "I suspected. Didn't know for sure. But, yeah, I suspected. You served with her, in Afghanistan." "I never said that." "You didn't have to." Chloe set down her cleaning rag. "What was she really? Even if I knew, which I'm not saying I do, I couldn't tell you. Some things stay secret for good reasons. And the rest of us just stumble around in the dark. Welcome to the world, kid. Most of it happens in the dark. The things that matter, the things that keep us safe, we never see them. We never know about them. We just live our lives while other people do the work we can't imagine. That's a depressing worldview." Monroe drained his glass, set it down with careful precision. "It's a realistic worldview. Willow, whoever she really was, she was doing something important. Important enough that when it got exposed, very serious, people moved very quickly to contain it. That tells you everything you need to know. Which is that we're lucky. Lucky that people like her exist, lucky that they do what they do, and lucky that most of the time we get to stay ignorant and safe." He stood, pulled on his jacket, left money on the bar for his tab. At the door he paused. "If you ever see her again, you won't, but if you did tell her, Derek says thanks for her service." Then he was gone, and Chloe was alone with her questions and her tips and the lingering sense that she'd been part of something significant without ever understanding what it was. At 6:41 a.m., 72 hours after her meeting at Langley, a woman who'd recently been Willow Harper, but was now someone else, entirely landed at Dubai International Airport. Her passport said she was Rachel Morrison, freelance journalist. Her cover story was solid. Her training was thorough. Her mission was clear. Find the man from the photograph. Figure out what he wanted. Stop him before more people died. As she cleared customs and headed toward the gate for her connecting flight to Boardroom, her encrypted phone vibrated once. A message from Vaughn. Go 7. We have a new assignment. This one's worse than the last. She looked at the message, then at the departure board, showing flights to dangerous places, then back at the phone. She typed a single word in reply. When? The response came immediately. You're already late. Check your secure email. She found a quiet corner, opened her laptop, accessed the encrypted server. The email contained a single attachment, the surveillance photo from 6 months ago, now annotated with facial recognition, markers, trajectory analysis, and a timestamp, and text that made her blood run cold. Subject unknown, priority alpha. Target identified, approaching village 12 hours before massacre. Possible connection to ghost. 7 compromise. Recommend immediate investigation. Assessment subject, may know your real identity. Assessment subject, likely responsible for bounty. Assessment, you are already compromised. Proceed with extreme caution. Below that, another photograph. More recent, higher resolution. The same man now in different clothes, different location. And behind him, barely visible in the background, a face she recognized. Her own face. From before. From an operation 3 years ago that should have been completely buried. Someone had her file. Someone knew her history. Someone was tracking her across operations, across identities, across the careful walls she'd built between her real life and her cover lives. And that someone wanted her dead. She closed the laptop, looked around the airport with new paranoia. Every face could be a threat. Every glance could be reconnaissance. Every moment could be the one where her luck ran out and someone recognized her, and $500,000 became more than hypothetical. But that was the job. Walk into danger, smile at death, and hope that training and instinct and luck combined in ways that let you survive one more day. She picked up her bag, headed toward the gate, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Behind her, unnoticed, a man with a camera phone captured her image and sent it to a number that didn't appear in any directory. The message was simple. Confirmed, Go 7 in Dubai, heading to Afghanistan. Payment requested per terms. The reply came within seconds. Confirmed. Transfer initiated. Continue surveillance. Do not engage. Wait for final instructions. And across the world, in places that would never appear on official maps, in conversations that would never be recorded, wheels began turning that would eventually lead to a reckoning. But that was still days away. For now, there was just a woman boarding a plane, carrying secrets that could get people killed, heading toward a confrontation she couldn't yet imagine. Ghost 7 was going back into the dark, and this time, the dark was waiting for her. The hours immediately following the revelation moved with the surreal quality of a dream collapsing into nightmare. In the MP station's secure conference room, hastily converted when Vaughn's team arrived, the full scope of the disaster became clear through a series of increasingly grim briefings. Hartwell sat at the head of a table, surrounded by people whose faces would haunt him. Vaughn with her glacier calm, Burke with his quiet self-recrimination, Palmer frantically documenting everything for the inevitable investigations. Through the one-way glass, they could see the main station floor where Reed and his SEAL team sat in rigid silence, phones, confiscated careers hanging by threads. "Let me make this absolutely clear," Vaughn said, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. Ghost 7 spent 6 months building an identity as Willow Harper. She established patterns developed. Relationships became invisible. That invisibility was her protection. Now, 43 civilians have video of her arrest. Those videos have been shared 17,000 times. Facial recognition software has already tagged her in databases we can't control. "We can scrub the videos," Palmer offered. "Issue takedown notices, and create a Streisand effect that makes it worse." "No, the videos stay up. We let them fade naturally, but the damage is done. Everyone in that trafficking network now knows a bartender named Willow Harper got arrested for stolen valor. They'll run her face. They'll find connections, and when they do, everyone she contacted becomes a liability." Burke's jaw tightened. "How many people are we talking about? 3 primary assets, 7 secondary contacts. Maybe 24 people who interacted with her regularly enough to be considered associates." Any of them could be targeted for interrogation about what they know. Interrogation, Hartwell repeated quietly. You mean torture. I mean interrogation. Whether it involves torture depends on how cooperative people are and how desperate the traffickers get. Vaughn pulled up a map on the laptop. Red dots scattered across San Diego and northern Mexico. These are known locations for the network we were tracking: arms dealers, smugglers, corrupt officials. Ghost 7 had identified 70% of their operation. Now they know we were watching. The room absorbed this in silence. 17,000 shares. 70% of an operation. Lives measured in percentages and probabilities. What do you need from us? Hartwell asked. Complete documentation of everyone who had access to Ghost 7 during custody. Every person who saw the classified file. Every individual who knows she's CIA. They all sign enhanced NDAs with criminal penalties. Anyone talks, they go to federal prison. No exceptions, no warnings, no second chances. That includes Lieutenant Reed. Especially Lieutenant Reed. Vaughn's eyes were flat, emotionless. He started this. He grabbed her in public. He called the MPs. He escalated when any reasonable person would have de-escalated. His ego put national security at risk. He thought he was protecting the Trident. I don't care what he thought, I care what he did. And what he did was compromise an active operation. Vaughn closed her laptop with decisive finality. Here's what happens next. Ghost 7 extracts tonight. You process paperwork saying this was a misunderstanding about a dead brother's shirt, which is technically true since we built that into her cover. Reed and his team get security briefings that terrify them into permanent silence. Everyone else involved gets threatened with prosecution if they breathe a word, and we pray that the trafficking network is too busy covering their own assets to start killing people. Pray? Burke repeated. That's our plan. Prayer. No, Master Chief. Prayer is what we do while our actual assets try to salvage what's left of this operation, using methods I can't discuss with people who don't have clearance. Vaughn stood, gathered her materials. Commander Hartwell, I need your conference room for the next 6 hours. Send Reed in first. This conversation is going to be unpleasant. One de bis. Lieutenant Jasper Reed entered the conference room at 12:17 a.m., looking like a man approaching his own execution. Vaughn didn't invite him to sit. She stood near the window, silhouetted against the parking lot lights, and let him stand at attention for 90 seconds before speaking. Do you know what Enoch means, Lieutenant? No, ma'am. Non-official cover. It's the deepest form of undercover work. No diplomatic immunity, no official connection to the government, no safety net. If an NOC operative gets caught, we deny they exist. If they get killed, their families get a folded flag and a story about a training accident. They operate completely alone in constant danger with nothing but their training and their wits keeping them alive. Reed's face had gone pale. Ma'am, you didn't know, I'm aware, but ignorance isn't a defense when the consequences involve national security. Vaughn turned to face him directly. Ghost 7 spent 6 months building cover. 6 months of 20-hour days of living a lie so thoroughly that she probably forgot who she really was. She did this to track weapons that kill Americans, and you destroyed it in 6 minutes because someone wearing a Trident shirt hurt your feelings. It wasn't about feelings, ma'am. It was about honor. Don't. Vaughn's voice dropped to something colder than ice. Don't talk to me about honor. Honor is doing your job even when nobody knows. Honor is sacrificing everything for a mission that will never be acknowledged. Ghost 7 has more honor in her little finger than you have in your entire body. And you nearly got her killed because you needed to be right in front of a crowd. Reed's shoulders slumped. What happens now? Now you sign an NDA that says if you discuss any detail of tonight, any detail with anyone, ever you'll be prosecuted for espionage. Then you go back to your team and you tell them the same thing. Then you live the rest of your career knowing you almost destroyed something important because you couldn't control your ego. She slid papers across the table. 10 pages of dense legal text. Reed picked them up with shaking hands. One more thing, Vaughn added. Ghost 7 had a source inside that trafficking network, a man who'd been feeding her information for 4 months, risking his life, because he believed in what she was doing. Tomorrow morning, his body will probably be found in a ditch outside Tijuana, and that's on you, Lieutenant. You wear that sealed Trident because you earned it through Hell Week. He's going to die because you needed everyone to know you earned it. Reed's face crumbled. He tried to speak, failed, tried again. "I'm sorry. Your apology means nothing to a dead man. Sign the papers." He signed. His hand left sweat marks on the pages. We're approaching the most explosive moment of this entire story. If you've made it this far, you're about to witness something incredible. Drop a comment below, guessing what you think the full consequences of this security breach will be. How many lives were affected? What happened to the trafficking network? The answers will shock you. Keep watching. The consequence cascade began within hours, spreading like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Each impact led to another. Each revelation triggered new protocols. Each person touched by the ghost, 7 incidents found their life altered in ways both immediate and profound. Layer 1. Immediate scene. Consequences. By 2 a.m., every person who'd been in the MP station had been processed through Vaughn's team. NDAs were signed under threat of federal prosecution. Phones were forensically analyzed and selectively wiped. The video footage from Interrogation Room 2 was pulled from servers and replaced with corrupted files that would frustrate any future investigation. Sheriff Hugo Mitchell, the civilian law enforcement who'd responded to the initial incident, received a visit from 2 federal agents who explained in excruciating detail that discussing this case with anyone, including his own department, would constitute obstruction of a federal investigation. Mitchell had been in law enforcement for 32 years. He knew when to shut up and look the other way. Naomi Sullivan, owner of Anchor Bar, was briefed at 3:15 a.m. by agents who arrived in her living room and scared her cat. She learned that her former employee had been working for the federal government in some capacity she couldn't know about, and that talking about it would result in her liquor license being permanently revoked. Naomi was savvy enough to understand this was the gentle version of the threat. The 43 witnesses from the bar were harder to track. Most of them had already posted videos, but the cleanup team was thorough. Within 6 hours, each witness received either a phone call or a personal visit. The message was consistent national security federal law, criminal penalties for disclosure. Most people complied because they didn't want trouble. A few complied because they sensed something genuinely important was at stake. One person, a retired Army colonel who'd been at Table 8, complied because he recognized the specific flavor of CIA cleanup and knew better than to interfere. By dawn, the official story was set. Willow Harper, bartender, arrested for wearing her dead brother's military insignia. Investigation confirmed the shirt's origin. Apology issued, case closed, nothing to see here. But in Tijuana at 4:37 a.m., a man named Carlos Mendoza, who'd been passing information to a friendly bartender about shipment routes and meeting locations, was dragged from his apartment by 3 men who asked very specific questions about what he'd told La Gringa and who else she'd talked to. His screams lasted 17 minutes before his neighbors called the police. By the time they arrived, Mendoza was dead and the killers were gone. Layer 2. Personal ripple effects. Lieutenant Reed's career didn't end officially. It simply stopped progressing. Within a week, he received orders reassigning him to Naval Special Warfare Group 2 in Mississippi. Technically a lateral move, practically exile. Mississippi was where they sent SEALs who'd screwed up, but not badly enough for court-martial. It was where careers went to die slowly. Reed packed his apartment in silence, ignoring calls from teammates who wanted to know what really happened. At his going-away gathering sparsely attended, Chief Wallace pulled him aside. "You need to understand something," Wallace said quietly. "What we did, what you started, it wasn't wrong in principle. Protecting the Trident matters, but principle without wisdom is just rigidity, and rigidity breaks things. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you still think you were basically right, that if she'd just explained herself, this all could have been avoided, but people in her position can't explain themselves. That's the whole point. They live in shadows so we can live in light. And we just dragged her into the light and burned her alive." Reed looked at his beer, unable to meet Wallace's eyes. "I didn't know. That's what makes it worse. If you'd known and done it anyway, you'd just be malicious. But you didn't know because you didn't stop to consider that maybe there was more to the situation than what you assumed. You saw stolen valor, and that was enough. You didn't see a person. You saw a problem you could solve with authority. What should I have done? Ask questions, shown patience, remembered that not everything is what it appears to be. Wallace drained his glass. I'm retiring, by the way. This was my last operation. I've been in for 20 years, seen some things, done some things. But this is the first time I've felt genuinely ashamed. Not because we did something evil, because we did something careless. And carelessness from people with power is just another form of violence. He left Reed at the bar, walked out into Mississippi humidity, and drove home to start a civilian life he'd been avoiding for years. The shame would fade eventually, but never completely disappear. Sergeant Mason Drake, the MP, who'd processed the arrest, received a formal letter of reprimand for insufficient diligence in investigating unusual circumstances. It was bureaucratic language that meant you should have known better. Drake wasn't fired, wasn't demoted, but his security clearance was flagged for enhanced review. Every future assignment would be scrutinized. Every background check would include this incident. He'd spend the rest of his career explaining why he'd arrested a CIA operative, and the explanations would never quite be sufficient. Corporal Amber Torres requested immediate transfer within 72 hours. Her reasoning was sound. She'd demonstrated good instincts by questioning the arrest, but nobody had listened to her until it was too late. That wasn't a command climate where she could thrive. Within a month, she was in Okinawa working night shifts and trying to forget the night she'd been right about something important and had been ignored because she was too junior to matter. Lieutenant Fiona Blackwood's JAG career stalled in ways that would only become apparent over time. She wasn't formally punished, but she wasn't selected for the prestigious assignments she'd been tracking toward. Her name stopped appearing on promotion lists. 6 months later, when she inquired about why her commanding officer gave her a look that communicated everything you displayed bad judgment in a situation that embarrassed the Navy. That's not something we forget. Layer 3. Professional impact. The base security chief, a captain named Derek Foster who hadn't even been present during the arrest, found himself writing a 50-page report on protocol failures in handling suspected military impersonation cases. The report would lead to new training requirements, new procedures, new layers of bureaucracy designed to prevent similar incidents. Foster would spend 6 months implementing these changes while quietly resenting that his career had been derailed by other people's mistakes. When Commander Hartwell accessed that classified database, he was navigating complex legal territory surrounding security clearances and need-to-know protocols. Legal firms specializing in security clearance issues provide representation for clearance denials, revocations, and investigations. They handle cases involving polygraph disputes, foreign contact allegations, and financial issues affecting clearances. These attorneys understand the appeals process for TS, SCI, and SAP access denials. For military and intelligence personnel, having legal counsel who understands classified information protocols is essential for protecting careers and reputations. Lieutenant Commander Iris Palmer, who'd helped access the classified database, found herself promoted to a position she hadn't applied for liaison officer between Naval Intelligence and CIA. It was technically a career boost. In reality, it was a way to keep her close to people who could monitor whether she discussed things she shouldn't. Palmer was smart enough to recognize the promotion for what it was: a gilded cage with a security clearance padlock. Master Chief Burke's request for additional clearances was granted with surprising speed. The Navy recognized that his instincts had been correct. He'd sensed something wrong and pushed for deeper investigation. That kind of perception was valuable. Within 2 months, he was attending training at Dam Neck on how to identify intelligence operatives in the wild. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd compromised an operative and was now being trained to protect them. Layer 4. Community transformation. Anchor Bar became briefly infamous. News crews camped outside for 3 days trying to get interviews about the Stolen Valor incident. Naomi Sullivan refused all requests, citing advice from her attorney, an attorney she'd never had before, but suddenly needed. Business increased for 2 weeks as people came to see where it happened, then decreased for 2 months as regulars stayed away from the circus. Eventually, equilibrium returned, but the character of the place had changed. There was a wariness now, a sense that the walls might have ears, that quiet customers might be more than they appeared. Chloe Winters, the bartender who'd befriended Willow, quit after 6 weeks. She couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, not by Willow, but by her own perception. She'd worked side by side with someone for months and never suspected the truth. It made her question every interaction, second-guess every customer. Eventually, she took a job at a coffee shop in Carlsbad, where the stakes were lower and the secrets were just about who was sleeping with whom. Derek Monroe continued occupying stool 3 every night from 6 to 9, but he stopped talking about his service. The younger patrons assumed he'd gotten quieter with age. The truth was simpler. He'd been reminded that some stories were never meant to be told, and silence was its own form of respect. Layer 5. Institutional changes. The Navy issued a new directive within 3 weeks, Protocol for Handling Suspected Military Impersonation in Sensitive Base Proximity. It was 10 pages of bureaucratese that boiled down to slow down, ask questions, consider alternatives, don't assume. Every MP on every base would receive training. Every officer would attend a briefing. The Ghost 7 incident would never be mentioned by name, but everyone would know which incident had triggered the changes. JSOC reviewed its procedures for protecting embedded operatives. New protocols were developed for new sea operatives working near military installations. Better coordination with base commanders, clearer markers for identifying active operations, layers of protection that should have existed before but hadn't because nobody had considered this specific failure mode. Congressional oversight committees received classified briefings about operational security incidents in fiscal year 2024. Ghost 7 wasn't named. The details were redacted. But funding was allocated for better training, better coordination, better protection for intelligence personnel working in domestic contexts. Money flowed through black budgets to programs that would never be publicly acknowledged, all because a bartender got arrested for wearing the wrong shirt. Layer 6. Legacy and long-term impact. Willow Harper, or whoever she'd been before, assuming that identity disappeared from official records. Her driver's license expired and wasn't renewed. Her social security number went dormant. The apartment in Hillcrest was cleaned out by people who left no trace of who they were or what they'd removed. Within 3 months, it was as if Willow Harper had never existed, which was exactly the point. But the trafficking network she'd been investigating didn't disappear. It adapted. Routes changed, personnel shifted. Operations became more cautious, more paranoid, more difficult to penetrate. The intelligence Ghost 7 had gathered was used where possible, but large sections of her work couldn't be leveraged, because doing so would reveal that the investigation had occurred at all. 47 weapons shipments that could have been intercepted were allowed to proceed, because stopping them would expose how much was known. In Afghanistan, a village elder who'd cooperated with American intelligence was killed by the Taliban. No connection was ever proven to the Ghost 7 compromise, but the timing was suspicious. His family received compensation through channels they didn't understand, money that appeared with no explanation except that he'd served American interests. They never learned that their father's death might have been connected to a bartender arrested in San Diego. The connections were too distant, too classified, too fragmentary to ever become a complete picture. And $500,000 remained available to anyone who could provide actionable intelligence on Ghost 7's real identity and current location. The bounty didn't expire. It just waited. That revelation was insane, wasn't it? But the story doesn't end here. There's another video on your screen right now about a female helicopter pilot who faced similar discrimination until they discovered her classified military record. Click it after this video ends. You won't regret it. And if this story moved, you hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible real-life military stories. 48 hours after the arrest, Commander Hartwell convened a final meeting in his office. Present were Burke Palmer Torres via secure video link from Okinawa and Special Agent Vaughn, who'd stayed in San Diego longer than planned to oversee the cleanup. "I wanted to address something," Hartwell began. "Before we all move forward with our careers and our lives, we made a mistake, a significant one, but it wasn't a mistake born of malice or negligence. It was a mistake born of incomplete information and reasonable assumptions. I want to make sure we all understand that distinction." "Well, does the distinction matter to Carlos Mendoza?" Vaughn asked quietly. "He's still dead." "No, it doesn't matter to him. But it matters for how we carry this forward. If we treat this as a moral failure, we'll be paralyzed by guilt. If we treat it as a learning experience, we'll be better at our jobs and better at protecting people." Burke nodded slowly. "Commander's right. What we did What Reed started and the rest of us enabled, it came from trying to do the right thing. We just had incomplete information about what the right thing actually was. The road to hell, Vaughn observed, is paved with good intentions, yes, but it's also the only road most of us have. We can't always know every variable. We just have to make the best decisions we can with the information we have. Torres spoke from the video screen, her voice tinny but clear. I knew something was wrong. I said something was wrong. Nobody listened. You were right, Hartwell acknowledged, and that's something I'll carry with me. You were junior, you were new, and you were right. I should have listened. We all should have. So what's the lesson? Palmer asked. Listen to Junior enlisted more, trust our instincts. Don't arrest people wearing military insignia. The lesson B's Vaughn said is that the world is more complicated than it appears, that people in positions of authority, people like all of you, have power to damage things you don't even know exist, and that power requires humility. Humility! Reed had said that word before leaving for Mississippi. It's not a trait we emphasize in SEAL training. Maybe it should be, Burke replied. Confidence is important, but confidence without wisdom is just arrogance, and arrogance kills. They sat in silence for a moment, each processing their own relationship to that truth. Finally, Hartwell spoke. Ghost 7, whoever she is, wherever she is now, she served her country in ways we'll never fully understand. She took risks we can't imagine, and when we accidentally exposed her, she didn't rage or threaten or demand retribution. She just moved on to the next mission. That's professionalism at a level most of us will never achieve. Do you know where she is now? Torres asked. No, and I don't want to. The less we know, the safer she is. Hartwell looked at each person in the room. If there's nothing else, we're done here. Dismissed. They stood, gathered materials, began to leave. At the door, Burke paused. Sir, for what it's worth, you handled this as well as anyone could have. You made hard calls in impossible circumstances. That takes courage. Courage didn't save Carlos Mendoza. No, but it might save the next person. That's all we can hope for. 3 weeks later, in a briefing room at Boardroom Airfield, Afghanistan, the woman who'd been Willow Harper, now operating under another name, with another cover, wearing another mask, reviewed intelligence photographs with a team of analysts who didn't know who she really was and didn't ask questions. The man from the photograph 6 months ago remained unidentified. Facial recognition had provided no matches. Linguistic analysis of the brief conversation suggested educated background, possibly military training, but nothing definitive. He was a ghost, hunting a ghost. And somewhere in the mountains between Pakistan and Afghanistan, their paths would cross again. We have a lead, one analyst said, pointing to a recent satellite image. This compound 30 kilometers southwest of Kandahar. We've identified unusual activity consistent with high-value target meetings. 3 vehicles arrived 2 days ago and haven't left. Ghost 7 studied the image. The compound was unremarkable. Mud walls, flat roof, solar panels suggesting modern amenities hidden behind traditional facade. But the positioning was good. Sightlines covered all approaches. Exits led to valleys that connected to smuggling routes into Pakistan. What's the source on this intelligence signal intercept? Someone at that compound used a sat phone to contact a number we've been monitoring. Conversation was encrypted, but the metadata tells us enough. She nodded, already calculating approach angles and contingency plans. This was what she did. This was who she was. Not Willow Harper, not Rachel Morrison, not any of the other names she'd worn. Just Ghost 7 moving through shadows, hunting monsters, trying to prevent massacres before they happened. I'll need tactical support. We can provide drone coverage and QRF on standby, but you're going in alone as per your operational parameters. Understood. When? We have a window tomorrow night. New moon, optimal conditions. She stood, gathered her gear, prepared to become someone else one more time. At the door, she paused. The village that was massacred 6 months ago. 47 people. Do we know why? The analyst checked his files. Working theory is they refused to cooperate with a trafficking network, wouldn't allow their roads to be used for smuggling, made themselves an obstacle. And the man in my photograph. If he's connected and that's still speculative, then he might be the one who gave the order or carried it out, or both. 47 people dead, because they said no to evil, and somewhere the man responsible was planning his next atrocity. Ghost 7 walked out of the briefing room, out of the secure facility, into the Afghan night, where the air smelled like dust and diesel and distant gunfire. She'd come back to this place, back to danger, back to shadows, back to the work that never ended and never made headlines and never earned public recognition. Because that was the job. Because people like Carlos Mendoza died when people like her failed. Because 47 villagers deserve justice even if justice would never be publicized or acknowledged or properly avenged. Her encrypted phone buzzed. A message from Vaughn. Ghost 7, Intel update. Target positively identified in compound. Name Qadir Ahmadi. Former Afghan intelligence turned rogue after U.S. withdrawal. Responsible for at least 3 massacres, including the village. He knows your face. He posted the bounty. He wants you dead because you're the only person who can connect him to all 3 attacks. Proceed with extreme caution. Authorization for lethal force granted. She stared at the message for a long moment, committing the name to memory. Qadir Ahmadi. Not a ghost anymore. A target. The phone buzzed again. Another message. One more thing. The photo from 6 months ago. We've enhanced it. He was showing you something in his hand. Can't confirm, but it looks like a photo. Of you. From an earlier operation. He's been tracking you longer than we thought. This isn't random. This is personal. Ghost 7 closed her eyes. Ran through memory files of every operation. Every face, every interaction that might have created an enemy this dedicated. Nothing surfaced clearly. Too many missions, too many covers. Too many lives lived and discarded. But that was the nature of her work. You created enemies in the dark, and sometimes they found you. She typed a single response. When do I leave? The reply was immediate. You're already late. Check your secure email. She pulled out her laptop, accessed the encrypted server. The mission brief was comprehensive compound. Layout guard positions, probable locations of Ahmadi, extraction routes, contingency plans, A through F, and a final note that made her blood run cold. Intelligence suggests Ahmadi has files on Ghost 7's real identity. Documents, photos, operational history. If he releases these files, your entire career, every cover, every operation, every asset you've ever worked with becomes compromised. Mission objective. Eliminate Ahmadi and secure all files. Failure is not an option. Good luck. She closed the laptop, checked her weapon, a Sig Sauer P226 that had been with her through 4 continents and a dozen identities, and walked toward the helicopter that would take her to the mission staging area. Behind her, unnoticed, a young lieutenant watched her depart and wondered who she really was. He'd been briefed that she was civilian intelligence contractor and told to ask no questions. He was smart enough to read between those lines and understand that some people operated in spaces where normal rules didn't apply. He'd remember her face, though. Remember the way she moved, economical, purposeful, like someone who'd long ago accepted that every mission might be the last. Years later, if someone showed him a photograph and asked, "Do you recognize this person?" he'd have to say no, because saying yes would betray secrets he didn't fully understand, but knew were important. That was how it worked in this world. Ghosts protecting ghosts, secrets protecting secrets, violence done in darkness so that people in daylight could live without fear. Testom, Ghost 7 boarded the helicopter at 2200 hours. The crew chief gave her a headset and a thumb up. The pilots didn't acknowledge her existence. Within 3 minutes, they were airborne, flying nap of the earth through Afghan night toward a compound where a man who wanted her dead was planning his next massacre. She checked her gear one final time. Weapon, ammunition, knife, communications equipment, first aid kit, and a small photograph tucked in a pocket where it shouldn't be, where operational security said it couldn't be, but where human need demanded. It exists a picture of her actual family, taken before she'd become Ghost 7, when she'd been someone with a real name and a real life and a future that didn't involve killing people in foreign countries. She looked at the photo for 5 seconds, then tucked it away. That person was gone. That life was finished. There was only the mission now. Only the compound ahead. Only Qadir Ahmadi, and whatever he knew, and whatever he'd done, and whatever justice looked like at the end of a silenced pistol. The helicopter descended toward the drop zone. Ghost 7 stood, grabbed the fast rope prepared to slide into darkness one more time. The crew chief tapped her shoulder, gave her the signal, 30 seconds. She nodded, positioned herself at the door, looked out at the Afghan landscape rushing past, below mountains and valleys and villages where people slept or didn't sleep, where children grew up in war zones and parents buried sons and daughters where the machinery of violence ground on regardless of who was right or wrong or caught in between. Somewhere down there, Kadir Ahmadi was waiting. He didn't know she was coming. He didn't know this was the night his story ended. He just knew he'd put a bounty on someone called Ghost 7, and somewhere somehow, eventually his enemies would come for him. But he didn't know she was already here, already in the air above him, already committed to a mission that would end with either his death or hers. The crew chief signaled, "Go." Ghost 7 slid down the rope into darkness, disappeared into the Afghan. Night became one more shadow among thousands. The helicopter pulled away, leaving no trace it had ever been there. And in a compound 30 kilometers away, Kadir Ahmadi felt an inexplicable chill, looked out at the darkness surrounding his walls, and wondered why he suddenly felt like prey. He would have his answer soon enough. The screen fades to black. Text appears. Some stories are still classified. Below that, some ghosts never stop hunting. And finally, Ghost 7's mission continues.